My wife, Willow, was considered the perfect wife in everyone's eyes. However, during a dinner gathering, she actually peeled shrimp for her junior, Makoto, right in front of everyone. Makoto said awkwardly, "I can do it myself," but Willow replied, "How could I let that happen? You're allergic to shrimp shells. The last time you peeled shrimp, your hands swelled up like pig trotters, and you still haven't learned your lesson." I couldn't help but sigh. A virtuous wife certainly knows when to be virtuous. While everyone waited to see my reaction, not only did I not lose my temper, but I continued chatting and laughing with our business partners as if nothing had happened. Only after we got home did I tap on the table. I told Willow to kneel down. Then I threw 10 jeans of shrimp in front of her. I said, "Peel them. Kneel there and peel every last one." Chapter 01. I had always been very satisfied with my arranged marriage partner. Willow came from a respectable family, had an impressive background, knew how to speak with tact, and after marriage, she never stayed out all night. She wasn't clingy, nor was she unreasonable. Whenever she stood by my side, she always knew what should be said and what should not be asked. To outsiders, she was Mrs. Wong, the perfect wife, gentle, considerate, and well-mannered. I valued that, not because of love, but because it made life easier. I have a strong aversion to messiness, not only in daily life, but also in relationships. I dislike complicated entanglements and have no tolerance for blurred boundaries. So during these 2 years of marriage, I gave her plenty of respect. She liked attention and prestige, so I gave her both. She wanted her own social circle, and I never interfered. Until that dinner gathering, it was an ordinary meal. 3 or 4 friends from the industry, along with her advisor and several students. The table was large, the dishes varied, and the atmosphere was neither particularly lively nor awkward. Makoto was one of those students. He was Willow's junior, 3 years younger than her and currently pursuing his master's degree. He wasn't tall, spoke softly, and always carried a slightly eager-to-please attitude when talking to others. I had met him several times before. Every time we met, he would stand up and greet me as Senior Wong in a respectful tone, but his gaze would always linger on Willow a little longer than necessary. I never paid much attention to it. People like him were not worth my concern. The dishes arrived quickly that day. When the shrimp was served, Willow naturally put on a pair of disposable gloves. She peeled shrimp with remarkable skill, not the awkwardness of someone doing it occasionally, but the ease of someone used to it. She pinched the shell, gave it a light twist, and the meat came out perfectly intact, even the tail remaining whole. After peeling the first shrimp, she didn't put it into her own bowl. Instead, she slid it across the table and placed it onto Makoto's plate. The movement was casual, without hesitation or deliberate intention. Makoto looked up and smiled at her. "Thanks, Willow." His tone was so natural, as if this were something that happened all the time. At that moment, my chopsticks paused in midair. Some people at the table were discussing projects. Others were answering phone calls. No one noticed what had just happened. Willow lowered her head and peeled a second shrimp. Again, it went to him. By the time she peeled the third one, she didn't even need to look to know where he was sitting. She simply reached out, and her hand found the right direction effortlessly. I watched the pile of shrimp shells gradually grow beside her. Her expression was focused, and there was the faintest hint of a smile at the corner of her lips. That wasn't politeness, it was habit. I said nothing. I didn't even look at her. I simply set down my chopsticks, took a sip of water, and committed the scene to memory. Many people think that if something doesn't explode on the spot, then it isn't a problem. That's not true. It means I'm confirming whether she did it unintentionally, or whether she genuinely saw nothing wrong with it. The dinner ended, and I drove her home as usual. The car was quiet. She asked if I was tired. I gave a brief and she said nothing more. Chapter 02. After we got home, I washed my hands and changed clothes as usual. She was in the kitchen pouring water and making tea. If it weren't for that bag of shrimp, I might have thought everything was no different from any other day. I sat on the sofa and watched her bring me a cup of tea. As she bent down, a few strands of hair fell forward, making her look especially alluring. I took the cup but didn't drink from it. "Willow," I called her name. She looked up at me with clear, innocent eyes. "What is it, honey?" I stood up and placed the cup back on the coffee table. Then I said, word by word, "Kneel." She froze for a moment. Not out of fear, she simply hadn't processed what she'd heard. "What did you say?" she asked in shock. I didn't repeat myself. Instead, I walked over and placed my hand on the back of her neck. The pressure wasn't heavy, but it left no room for resistance. Forced to lower herself, she didn't realize something was seriously wrong until her knees touched the floor. "George, what are you doing?" Her voice tightened with anxiety. I didn't answer. I simply made sure she was kneeling properly, then released her and walked into the storage room. A few minutes later, I returned carrying a large bag of shrimp. 10 pounds of it. Fresh. The ice packs inside hadn't even fully melted yet. I set the bag down in front of her. The shrimp thudded dully against the plastic. Peel them. Her expression changed completely. Have you lost your mind? Over something that small today? At last, she understood what this was about. I just peeled a few shrimp for Makoto. Is this really necessary? She looked up at me, her eyes filled with grievance and confusion. Then she said, "You don't even like eating shrimp anyway." She thought she had found the key point. I crouched down and looked directly into her eyes. Whether I eat shrimp or not has absolutely nothing to do with who you peel shrimp for. Her lips parted. She wanted to argue, but the words never came out. I tossed a pair of gloves in front of her. Peel them. I pointed at the shrimp, just like you did earlier. She didn't move immediately. She was still waiting. Waiting for me to calm down. Waiting for my anger to fade. Waiting for this to become an argument that could eventually be forgotten. I stood up and stopped looking at her. Don't get up until you're finished. Finally, she lowered her head and put on the gloves. The sound of shrimp shells being cracked open echoed clearly through the living room. 1, 2, 3. At first her movements were clumsy, but gradually she found her rhythm. The same rhythm she had displayed at the dinner table. I sat nearby reviewing documents, never rushing her. Time stretched endlessly. Her fingers gradually turned red, yet she didn't dare stop. Several times she looked up at me. Each time, I gave no response. Eventually she couldn't hold back anymore. What exactly do you want from me? She demanded sharply. I closed the file and looked at her. I want you to remember one thing. Some actions are not done absent-mindedly. Her eyes widened slightly. I stood up and looked down at her. A woman who doesn't understand boundaries is only worth keeping if she can learn to behave. Her breathing caught. Then I continued. If she can't learn, she'll be replaced. The moment those words fell, her entire body stiffened. A shrimp shell slipped from her fingers and landed on the floor. I said nothing more. That night, I made her peel all 10 pounds of shrimp. There was no shouting, no struggle, only piles of shrimp shells covering the floor. Before turning off the lights in my study, I glanced at her one last time. She was still kneeling there, her back perfectly straight, as though she were being stubborn, or perhaps simply forcing herself to endure. Chapter 03. When morning came, the house was quiet. Willow was in the kitchen frying eggs. The sound of oil sizzling was soft, as if she were intentionally trying to keep the noise down. When she saw me come out, her hand paused briefly before she turned the heat lower. You didn't sleep much last night, did you? She pushed a plate toward me and spoke gently. Why don't you go to the office a little later today? I sat down without looking at her. Same schedule as usual. She nodded and handed me a cup of coffee. As always, she stood nearby, waiting for me to take the first sip. I didn't drink it. She quickly realized something was wrong. Are you still upset? She smiled slightly, testing the waters. I really wasn't paying attention yesterday. It won't happen again. Her tone was natural, as though she were dealing with a minor mistake that could easily be forgiven. I pushed the coffee cup back toward her. I'm leaving after breakfast. She froze for a moment, then quickly continued. I already apologized. Lowering her voice, she said, you can't keep acting like this forever, can you? I didn't respond. The driver took us to work. Neither of us spoke during the ride. She scrolled through her phone in the back seat, occasionally glancing at me. Several times it looked like she wanted to say something, but she stopped herself. When we arrived at the office, I got out of the car. She followed. Dinner together tonight? She asked. I looked back at her. You should focus on your own plans first. She remained standing there, watching as the car door closed. The expression on her face slowly disappeared. After entering the company, I attended meetings, signed documents, and handled emails as usual. The rhythm of the day hadn't changed. Only a few access permissions had been quietly adjusted. Before lunch, my assistant handed me a report. CEO Wang, the projects you previously arranged for your wife have all been suspended. I nodded. At 3 in the afternoon, Willow called. I didn't answer. 5 minutes later, she called again. I still didn't answer. Before the end of the workday, she appeared downstairs at the company. She was dressed formally, her makeup immaculate, looking as though she were about to meet someone important. By the time reception called me, she had already been waiting for 10 minutes. I told them to let her come up. When she entered my office, her expression was already strained. Why aren't you answering my calls? She asked. I closed the file and looked up at her. I was in meetings. I sent you messages. I saw them. She stood in front of my desk without sitting down. Then why didn't you reply? I looked at her and answered flatly. There was no need. Her brows furrowed. George, we're married, she said. Is there really any point in giving me the cold shoulder like this? I leaned back in my chair and didn't argue. After waiting for a response and receiving none, frustration crept into her voice. I already apologized for yesterday. She emphasized every word. I told you I'd be more careful in the future. What else do you want? I stood up and walked toward the window. Do you think that was an argument? She was silent for a moment. What else would it be? She replied. Couples argue all the time. I turned and looked at her. If that's how you want to see it, then fine. Call it an argument. The tension visibly left her body. Good. She smiled. I knew you wouldn't keep dwelling on something so small forever. She turned to leave, then suddenly remembered something and looked back. Oh, right. I'm traveling out of town tomorrow for a forum. Didn't you tell me to book first class? I was trying to reserve my ticket earlier, but the system said I don't have sufficient authorization. I looked at her. The trip has been cancelled. The smile froze on her face. What? The forum? You're not going. Why? Her voice rose slightly. My advisor personally recommended me for it. I've already accepted. You can still decline. She stared at me, trying to determine whether I was joking. Frowning, Willow said, "You're interfering with my work." I didn't deny it. Her words came faster. "Weren't you always the one saying you supported me? And now, because of one dinner, you're going to cancel everything I've arranged?" I walked back to the desk and picked up my coat. "I'm not canceling them." I paused. "I'm taking them back." The color drained from her face. "What does that mean?" "It means everything you're using right now was given to you by me." I looked directly at her. "And if I decide to take it back, I don't need a reason." Her breathing became noticeably uneven. "You can't do this." She shook her head. "I'm not living off you." I glanced at her once. "Then that's perfect." With that, I walked out of the office, giving her no opportunity to say another word. Chapter 04. That night, she didn't come home. The next morning, I left as usual. The house was empty, and the dining table was almost unnaturally spotless. Around noon, my assistant informed me that several transactions had been blocked by the system. "Your wife's card was used a few times, but none of the payments went through." I told him not to do anything about it. That afternoon, Willow sent me a message. "My card isn't working." I didn't reply. A while later, another message arrived. "Is there a problem with the system?" I still didn't respond. By evening, she came directly to the company. This time, she didn't wait for reception to announce her arrival. She stormed straight into my office. "What exactly are you trying to do?" Her emotions were clearly on the verge of breaking loose. I signaled for my assistant to leave. Soon, only the two of us remained. She stared at me and said word by word, "Do you think this is fun? Watching my cards get declined, watching my projects fall apart, and then waiting for me to come crawling back to beg you. Does that make you feel accomplished?" I placed my phone on the desk. "Weren't you the one who said this was just an argument?" My words immediately silenced her. Only then did she lower her posture slightly. "I'm not saying you aren't allowed to be angry." Her voice softened. "But the way you're handling this is too much." I stood and walked toward her. Whether it's too much or not is for me to decide. Instinctively, she took a step backward. Biting her lip, she said, "I'm not some canary locked in a cage, controlled by you in every aspect of my life. I have my dignity too." I looked at her calmly. "Is that dignity earned by peeling shrimp for another man?" Her face instantly flushed red. "You're bringing that up again." Her voice trembled. "I already explained it. It was just a casual gesture," I said. "So what comes next? A casual kiss?" She bit her lip and fell silent. I returned to my seat and reopened my file. "You can keep telling yourself this is just an argument." I didn't even look up. "I don't expect you to understand." She stood there for a long time without moving. Finally, she asked, "When are you going to restore everything?" I looked up. "Restore what?" "The cards, the flights, the schedules." She looked at me steadily. "There has to be some deadline, doesn't there?" I met her gaze. "When you stop treating a matter of principles as if it's merely a matter of emotions." She froze. Then, biting her lip again, she said, "You're punishing me." I didn't deny it. The look in her eyes gradually became unfamiliar. "You weren't like this before." I closed the file and replied word by word. "You weren't like this before, either." She opened her mouth to speak. In the end, nothing came out. After Willow left, I instructed my assistant to push back that evening's business engagement by half an hour. I wasn't in a hurry to go home. She treated a matter of boundaries and principles as though it were simply a marital disagreement. So I handled it according to rules. Rules are not established through arguments. They are established through enforcement. My phone vibrated on the desk. An unfamiliar local number. I glanced at the caller ID and answered. "Senior Wang." The voice on the other end was soft and excessively polite. "This is Makoto, Willow's junior." I said nothing, perhaps afraid of an awkward silence. He hurriedly added, "Sorry to bother you. I'll only take a minute." I moved the phone slightly away from my ear and continued reviewing documents. "Go ahead." He visibly relaxed. With a nervous laugh, Makoto said, "About the dinner the other night, Willow told me that you may have gotten the wrong idea." He paused. "Honestly, there was nothing going on. We're just from the same academic group. Willow usually looks after me a little more than the others." I asked. "Looks after you enough to peel shrimp for you?" He stopped for 2 seconds, seemingly organizing his thoughts. "That's because my hands are allergic," he quickly explained. "If seafood shells scratch my skin, I get an allergic reaction. I felt embarrassed at the time, but Willow is kind. She didn't want me to feel awkward, so she helped me out. I neither laughed nor argued. That kind of excuse wasn't even worth refuting. In fact, the smoother he delivered it, the more obvious it became that he had rehearsed it beforehand. He continued. Willow has been really upset these past 2 days. She genuinely cares about you. At school, she's always been strong-willed. There aren't many people who can make her lower her head. He paused before adding. After she went back last night, she kept explaining everything. She said you're very strict with her, and she's willing to change. That crossed the line. He was defending her, speaking on her behalf, and at the same time, quietly trying to paint me as the villain. Chapter 05. I closed the file and spoke evenly. After telling me all that, what exactly are you trying to say? He panicked and immediately denied it. No, that's not what I mean. I just don't want you and Willow to end up unhappy because of me. As if afraid I wouldn't believe him, he sped up his speech. How about this? From now on, I'll keep my distance from Willow. Any project discussions can go through our advisor or the group chat. I won't contact her privately anymore. He sounded very sensible. So sensible that it almost felt like he was giving me instructions. I ignored his declaration and asked only one question. Who told you to make this call? There was another brief silence. Willow doesn't know. His voice lowered. I decided to do it myself. Willow cares a lot about her reputation. She doesn't like discussing family matters with other people. I just felt bad seeing her suffer. He disguised his concern carefully, subtle enough to seem innocent, suggestive enough to be intimate. I switched the phone to my other hand. Makoto Ito. I called him by his full name. Yes, George, I said. Willow's affairs are none of your business. He responded immediately. I understand. I just didn't want you to misunderstand her. I paused. Then my voice turned cold. Whether I misunderstand her or not is none of your concern. I continued. And if you truly feel guilty, there's something you can do, he immediately asked. Please tell me, I said. From now on, don't call me by my name when you see me. My voice was flat. We're not that familiar. The breathing on the other end clearly faltered. Okay. He forced a laugh. Then I'll call you CEO Wong. I gave a brief acknowledgement and was about to hang up, but he hurriedly stopped me. CEO Wong. Willow really is a good wife. She's never done anything inappropriate. He spoke quickly, and the reason she takes such good care of me isn't anything else. When I first joined the research group, I didn't understand anything. She helped me through a lot. Then he added. I've always seen her as my own sister. The word sister was emphasized heavily, as though he expected nobody to believe it otherwise. I hung up. A knock sounded at the door. My assistant entered and handed me a guest list for an evening banquet. CEO Wong. Regarding CEO Chan's gathering tonight, the other side mentioned that Ms. Willow will also be attending. I took the list and glanced through it casually. Sure enough, Willow's name was there, and beneath her name was an additional note, accompanied by a university representative. I set the list back down. The venue stays the same. The schedule stays the same. My assistant nodded and left. I placed my phone in the drawer and returned to work. At 7:40 that evening, I arrived at the restaurant. Quite a few people were already seated inside the private room. The food hadn't been served yet, but the atmosphere was already lively. Willow sat near the center of the table. She wore a dark emerald green dress and held a glass while chatting with the others, a perfectly measured smile resting on her lips. The moment she saw me enter, her eyes lit up. She immediately stood. You're here. Her voice was gentle. I thought you weren't coming. I didn't respond. My gaze passed over her and landed on the men beside her. Makoto also stood. His hands were folded neatly in front of him, looking every bit the cautious student. CEO Wong. He spoke carefully. Thank you for coming. I nodded and didn't spare him another glance. Willow seemed eager to close the distance between us. She reached out to pull a chair for me. I pulled one out myself and sat down. Her hand froze in midair. Then she calmly withdrew it and returned to her seat as if nothing had happened. CEO Chan entered carrying a glass of wine. After clinking glasses with me, he laughed and said, CEO Wong, your timing is perfect. Professor Willow brought her junior with her today. She said he's one of the university's promising new talents, young and full of ideas. A good chance for all of us to get acquainted. Willow smiled naturally. Makoto really is excellent. He's hardworking and very thoughtful. Makoto immediately lowered his head. You're giving me too much credit, Willow. His humble act was flawless. The dishes began arriving one after another. There was shrimp again. Under the table, Willow's fingers moved slightly. Instinctively, she seemed about to reach for a pair of gloves. Then she abruptly stopped herself. She looked up at me. There was a question in her eyes. I showed no reaction whatsoever. Slowly, her hand withdrew. She lifted her teacup and took a sip. The smile on her face became somewhat stiff. Makoto, meanwhile, was very good at making himself noticeable. He took the initiative to pour drinks for the elders at the table, served food, and spoke sparingly. Yet somehow every sentence included either gratitude toward Willow or appreciation for her care and guidance. CEO Chan listened with amusement and eventually joked. Professor Willow really knows how to mentor people. Young men this considerate are hard to find these days. Chapter 06. Willow was smiling, but the corners of her eyes kept drifting toward me. She wanted to see whether I would lose my temper. I didn't. I simply ate my meal and occasionally exchanged a few polite remarks. Makoto probably took my silence as approval, because his confidence gradually grew. Holding a wine glass, he walked over to my side and bent slightly. CEO Wang, let me offer you a toast as well. Then he added, I know you have high expectations for Willow, and that's for her own good, but she's always working so hard to maintain your image in public. Honestly, that's exhausting for her too. The words sounded sincere, as if he genuinely felt sorry for Willow. I looked up at him. Are you very close to her? He gave an awkward smile. We're from the same academic group. We work together a lot. I asked. You work together enough to know whether she's tired or not. I paused. You seem to understand her thoughts quite well. His fingers tightened around the glass. The wine nearly spilled. Willow immediately cut in. George, Makoto is just concerned about me. He's straightforward by nature. Don't take it personally. She responded far too quickly, so quickly that it felt instinctive, as though defending Makoto had become her first reaction. The private room instantly fell silent. Several CEOs exchanged glances. None of them spoke. They simply lowered their heads and drank, pretending they hadn't heard anything. Makoto hurried to smooth things over. CEO Wang. I spoke out of turn. He forced a smile. I just think Willow carries too much on her shoulders. She keeps everything bottled up. I picked up my glass and lightly tapped it against his. I'll drink the wine. Then I looked at him. But there's no need for you to speak on her behalf. He nodded repeatedly. Of course, you're right. Willow's expression darkened. With a smile, she quickly changed the subject, talking about projects and university partnerships. Her enthusiasm was noticeably greater than before, as though she were trying to erase the awkwardness from a few moments earlier. Halfway through dinner, CEO Chan brought up a recent university-industry collaboration project and mentioned that a specific person would need to be assigned as the liaison. Willow immediately responded, I can do it. I'll take responsibility. CEO Chan looked toward me. What do you think? CEO Wang. Does Professor Willow have enough time for it? Without looking at Willow, I answered directly. She doesn't. The room fell silent again. The smile froze on Willow's face. Why? She asked. My tone remained calm. She already has enough on her plate. Willow frowned. Stubbornly, she said. This project was negotiated by my advisor and me. I'm the most suitable person to handle it. Makoto lifted his head as if he wanted to support her. Then he forcibly restrained himself. He merely set down his glass, wearing an expression that suggested the situation was unfair to Willow. I ignored him completely. Instead, I turned to CEO Chan. The liaison will be changed. I'll arrange someone from my side. CEO Chan's expression shifted briefly, but he quickly smiled again. That's fine. If CEO Wang is handling it, I'll feel even more assured. Willow's grip on her glass tightened. I could see her chest rise and fall once. That statement had clearly struck a nerve, but in a setting like this, she couldn't lose her temper, nor could she afford to. So she swallowed her emotions and forced a graceful smile. Then I'll follow your arrangement. The words sounded obedient. Her eyes, however, were cold as frost. When the dinner finally ended, Makoto rushed ahead to press the elevator button. He stood beside Willow, almost as though he were protecting her. Willow walked over to me and lowered her voice. You did that on purpose today. I looked at our reflections in the elevator doors, and bringing him here wasn't intentional. She choked on her response. Her eyes flickered. I brought him because of work. I asked. Did work also require him to speak for you? Instinctively, she glanced back at Makoto. Makoto immediately lowered his head, pretending not to hear. Willow's voice dropped even further. Don't make a scene here. I didn't pursue the matter. The elevator arrived. I stepped inside first. Willow followed. Makoto moved to enter as well. I raised a hand and stopped him. I looked at him and said, take the stairs. Makoto's face instantly went pale. CEO Wang. This is the 20th floor. You know the way. I cut him off. The elevator doors closed. Only Willow and I remained inside. She stared at me, her eyes burning with anger. Was that really necessary? She demanded. I pressed the button for the first floor. Do you feel sorry for him? She clenched her teeth. Don't make it sound so ugly. The elevator descended. The floor numbers changed one by one. Her hand remained tightly wrapped around the strap of her bag. The knuckles had already turned white. I said nothing more. Some people think lowering their heads is enough to escape consequences. Others think sharing a dinner table with me puts them on equal footing with me. They will learn soon enough. Being remembered by me has never been a good thing. Chapter 07. When the elevator reached the first floor and the doors opened, Willow walked out first. Her pace was quick. I didn't follow her, nor did I call her back. The car was waiting at the entrance, and the driver opened the rear door for me. Willow didn't get in. She stood at the bottom of the steps with her back to me, making a phone call. Her voice was low, as though she was afraid I might overhear. I got into the car and closed the door. Just before the window rolled up completely, she turned and looked at me. There was resentment in her eyes, and defiance. I instructed the driver to leave. When I arrived home, the lights were on. Willow had returned before me. She had already hung up her coat and was standing in the middle of the living room, as if waiting for me to speak first. I changed my shoes and washed my hands. My movements were unhurried. Finally, she couldn't hold back anymore. What exactly was that supposed to mean today? Her voice was filled with frustration. You canceled my project in front of everyone. How am I supposed to face people after that? I looked at her. Aren't you quite good at handling people? I replied. You even take exceptionally good care of your junior. Her expression darkened. You're bringing that up again. I shrugged. You asked what I meant, so I'm telling you. You have no sense of boundaries. It's that simple. She snapped back. Boundaries. You keep forcing everything into that category. Don't you think that's ridiculous? I didn't argue with her. Instead, I turned toward the study. She hurried after me and blocked the doorway. Don't walk away. Staring directly at me, she continued. Do you just want me to lower my head and apologize? Fine, I can do that. I've already compromised enough. What more do you want? I stopped and looked at her. Compromised, I repeated. You consider this a compromise? Her lips pressed together. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her eyes before determination returned. I admit I didn't think things through, but you can't humiliate me like this. What about the 10 pounds of shrimp? Don't you think that was excessive? I don't, I answered immediately. If you think peeling shrimp for another man is such a trivial thing, then I think making you peel 10 pounds of shrimp was perfectly appropriate. I paused. At most, I'd call it a little hard work on your part. She was speechless. Her face grew even darker. It was just peeling shrimp, she protested. You're turning it into some huge issue about principles. Isn't that a little dramatic? She sounded completely justified, which was fine by me. I pushed open the study door, walked inside, and closed it behind me. She knocked twice from outside. George, stop pretending you can't hear me. I didn't respond. That night, she didn't continue the argument. The lights in the living room remained on until very late. I slept in the study. At 6 the next morning, I got up, washed, and got dressed. When I walked out, she was already sitting at the dining table. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. The moment she saw me, she spoke. What I said last night was too harsh. Her voice was noticeably softer. I admit there were things I handled poorly, but you should at least give me a chance to explain. I simply picked up my coat. You don't need to explain. I said it calmly. She froze. What do you mean? I walked to the front door. Then I stopped and looked back at her. We're getting divorced. She reacted instantly. With one sweep of her arm, she knocked over a glass of water. Water spilled across the table and splashed onto the floor. She stood up. Anger filled her face. What did you just say? Her voice became sharp. You're threatening me with divorce. It's not a threat. My tone remained calm. She took 2 steps toward me, trying to grab my arm. Over something this small. You're talking about divorce. George, don't you think you're being impulsive? I raised my hand and glanced at my watch. I have a meeting at 9. If you want to argue, contact my lawyer. Her expression shattered. Lawyer? You've already contacted a lawyer? I didn't deny it. Her fingers trembled. It was as if she had suddenly realized I wasn't speaking in anger. Her voice shook. You're serious? I'm always serious when I make decisions. She clenched her teeth. Her eyes reddened. Yet she stubbornly refused to cry. This is because of Makoto. I don't believe that for a second. She pointed at me. You've wanted to divorce me for a long time, haven't you? You've been unhappy with me for ages. You're just using this as an excuse and blaming everything on me. I looked at her and let out a short scoff. You're the one who brought him in front of me. You're the one who let him stand beside you and speak on your behalf. Those were your choices. I met her gaze. And adults are responsible for the consequences of their choices. She immediately fired back. He only came with me to discuss a business collaboration. I asked. Did that collaboration require him to defend you in front of me? For half a second, she had no answer. Then she changed tactics immediately. You're just controlling. She pointed accusingly at me. You can't stand seeing me interact with any men at all. Chapter 08. I neither laughed nor got angry. You can interact with other people, I said. But what counts as interaction? Talking is interaction. Shaking hands is interaction. Peeling shrimp is interaction. Sleeping together is interaction. Even interaction has boundaries. I looked at her calmly. And right now, you're crossing those boundaries without even realizing it. Willow's chest rose and fell sharply. Her voice became even more shrill. And who are you to decide what's crossing a boundary? Peeling shrimp is crossing a boundary. She stared at me. Do you think that just because I married you, I should spend the rest of my life revolving around you? I stopped arguing, gripping the doorknob. I said, once the papers are signed and the procedures are finished, you can interact with whoever you want. She rushed to the door and blocked it. I'm not signing. It makes no difference. If you won't sign voluntarily, I'll file a lawsuit. Panic finally began to appear in her eyes. Even so, she stubbornly refused to back down. You wouldn't dare. What good does this do for you? She glared at me. Aren't you the one who cares most about your public image? I pulled the door open. The times have changed. Willow, divorce won't damage my image. Her fingers tightened around the doorframe until her knuckles turned white. George, don't forget this was an arranged marriage. If you divorce me, how are you going to explain it to both families? I'll handle the explanation, I answered without hesitation. She froze, as if she couldn't believe I was this indifferent. I didn't stay any longer. I left the house and got into the car. Not long after we drove away, my assistant sent a document to my tablet. It was the preliminary draft of the divorce agreement prepared by my lawyer. I skimmed through it. The terms were straightforward. Premarital assets would remain with their original owners. Joint assets would be divided according to agreed proportions. As for the house jointly registered under both our names, she would receive a compensation payment based on its value. Everything was written clearly and transparently. There was no unfair settlement, nor was there any attempt to make things difficult for her. I don't rely on those kinds of tactics. I only wanted a clean break. At 10:30 that morning, the lawyer arrived at the company. We reviewed the details in a conference room. CEO Wang. If Ms. Willow refuses the agreement, we can proceed through litigation. He adjusted the documents before continuing. However, for someone in your position, a negotiated settlement would be much more efficient. I nodded. Start with the agreement. Give her 1 day. The lawyer hesitated. Isn't 1 day a little short? It's enough, I replied. Around noon, Willow finally called. I answered. Her voice sounded tightly restrained. You were the one who had those papers delivered. Yes. You gave me 1 day. She bit down on the words. What do you think our marriage is? A business negotiation. You don't have to sign, I replied. If you refuse, we'll go through the courts. She fell silent for several seconds. Her breathing became uneven. So this is all just to force me to admit I'm wrong, I answered calmly. What I need isn't your admission of fault. You know how I am. I have a strong aversion to contamination. What I need is a clean relationship. The silence on the other end became frightening. A long moment passed before she spoke again. You're really not leaving me any room at all. I already gave you room, I replied. You simply didn't take it seriously. Her voice began to tremble. I didn't cheat. I didn't do anything. So why are you treating me like this? I didn't launch into a lecture, nor did I try to explain everything. I simply said, the reason you think you've done nothing wrong is because your values are already distorted. You think you're not the problem. And that's exactly the problem. The words clearly struck a nerve. Suddenly, her voice rose. Then tell me where the problem is. Explain it clearly. I had no interest in repeating myself. I'm not a broken record. She paused for half a second. Then, as if grabbing onto a single point of attack, she spoke slowly and deliberately. The day I peeled shrimp for him, you got that angry. Her voice became lower. Did you think I became dirty because of that? Is that really how little you think of me? I replied. No. You simply have no sense of boundaries. She let out a cold laugh. Boundaries? What kind of boundaries do you expect me to have? He's my junior. He needed help. Am I not even allowed to help him? There are many ways to help someone, I answered. You chose the one that crossed the line the most. Her voice caught for a moment, as though the remark had hit its mark, but almost immediately she raised her voice again. You're blowing this completely out of proportion. Chapter 09. I didn't continue arguing. I simply said, reply to the lawyer before 5 this afternoon. Then I hung up. At 3 o'clock, Willow appeared at the company. This time, she didn't force her way in. Reception notified me first, and only after I gave permission was she allowed upstairs. She wasn't wearing any makeup today. Her complexion looked pale, as if she hadn't had the energy to care about her appearance. Yet her back remained perfectly straight, stubbornly supporting the last traces of pride she refused to surrender. George, standing in front of my desk, she threw the agreement onto it. What exactly is this supposed to mean? I leaned back in my chair. If you can't understand it, ask your lawyer. She stared at me. You're giving me money and compensation for the house. Her voice tightened. Is this supposed to make you look generous? I looked up. It's the proper division of our shared assets. She bit her lip. Her voice softened slightly. You think I'll be grateful for this? You don't need to be grateful, I answered. You only need to sign. Tears gathered in her eyes, but they didn't fall. Do you really not want me anymore? She asked. I corrected her. I'm removing something unclean from my life. She abruptly raised her head. How have I wronged you? Her emotions finally broke through. After I married you, I always protected your reputation in public. I never caused trouble at home. You keep saying I have no boundaries, but have you ever considered that you've never treated me like a real person? You treated me like a decoration. Her voice trembled. Her hands trembled as well. I looked directly at her. I didn't avoid her gaze. Then I said, a decoration doesn't cross boundaries. The word struck her like a blade. The color instantly drained from her face. Can you really be this heartless? She asked. I'm not heartless, I replied calmly. I simply don't compromise. She stared at me desperately, as if still waiting for me to soften, waiting for me to say, if you're willing to change, we can still continue. But I didn't. I placed a pen in front of her. Then I said, word by word, sign it. We can complete the procedures today. Her fingers slowly reached toward the pen, then stopped in midair. Pressing her lips together, she asked, what if I refuse? You can refuse. I met her eyes. The outcome won't change, only the amount of time required. Something in her expression finally changed. It wasn't anger. It wasn't grievance. It was the emptiness that comes when hope suddenly disappears. Slowly, she sat down. She picked up the pen. The tip hovered above the paper for a very long time. George, her voice was barely audible. Will you really never regret this? I didn't answer the question directly. Instead, I said, I don't lack women. Her hand trembled. The pen scratched a thin line across the paper. Then I finished the sentence. My tone was as steady as if I were negotiating a business deal. What I lack is a woman with clear boundaries. Her eyes had become intensely red. Finally, she lowered the pen and signed her name on the agreement. The moment she finished signing, her hand dropped to her side, as though all strength had suddenly left her body. She looked up at me. Her lips were pale. So this time, her voice was hoarse. It wasn't a threat. I gathered the agreement and pressed the intercom button. Send the lawyer in. Chapter 10. The day the divorce was finalized, I had the driver take a detour to the family estate so I could make everything clear. This had been an arranged marriage, not a love story. Once the process was complete, only a few formal words needed to be said. The relationship had run its course. Our personalities were incompatible. From now on, we would each go our separate ways. The elders on her side of the family didn't look pleased, but no one pressed for details. What they cared about was the outcome and the interests involved. The answer I provided was clear enough. Willow did not return to my residence. She moved back into the apartment she had owned before the marriage. It was in a good location, with tasteful interior design. The property belonged to her. She seemed to think she was merely changing addresses, that her social circle remained intact, that her work remained intact. But the next morning, my assistant placed a project coordination report on my desk. 2 projects had originally listed Willow as the primary liaison with the university. Her name was clearly marked among the contact personnel. I flipped to the final page and made several marks with my pen. Replace the liaison. I handed the document back. From now on, for all university collaborations, we recognize institutions, not individuals. My assistant nodded without asking questions. I took no additional action. I simply untied every professional connection that had been linked through her. That same afternoon, CEO Chan came to discuss a new project. Halfway through the meeting, he casually remarked, how come Professor Willow has been so quiet lately? I've messaged her a few times about project progress, and she hardly responds. I pushed the contract toward him. Those projects are no longer under her responsibility. CEO Chan paused briefly. Then he smiled. I understand. He didn't ask any further questions. Smart people know when silence is the wiser choice. On the 3rd day, Willow came looking for me. Not at the company. At a private club I frequented. She was waiting at the entrance. Her outfit was elegant and carefully chosen, but faint dark circles lingered beneath her eyes. Her smile remained graceful. Maintaining it, however, clearly required effort. Can we talk? She asked. I didn't stop walking. Instead, I continued toward the entrance. The agreement has already been signed. There's nothing left to discuss. She quickened her pace and caught up. I'm not here to ask for reconciliation. That made me stop. I turned my head slightly toward her. Then why are you here? She bit her lip. The projects. Her voice tightened. Did you have me removed from them? I answered with a single word. Yes. No explanation. No elaboration. Immediately, anxiety flashed across her face. Those partnerships were negotiated by me. My advisor has been asking why I was suddenly replaced. I don't know how to explain it. I looked at her. The reason you need an explanation is because you've become accustomed to operating through my status. Her expression shifted. Biting her lip again, she replied. I rely on my abilities, not your status. I didn't argue. Instead, I said, if it's really your abilities that matter, then go negotiate with them yourself. My voice remained calm. Why come to me and complain? The words left her frozen. For several seconds she couldn't answer. Eventually, she forced out, "You're targeting me." I stepped into the elevator. "You think too highly of your own importance." I pressed the button. "If you're no longer in that position, then naturally you shouldn't be the one handling those negotiations." Just before the elevator doors closed, she suddenly thrust out a hand to block them. "George." Her voice trembled. "What do you want me to do before you'll finally be satisfied?" I looked at her fingers trapped in the narrowing gap. My tone never changed. "I don't need you to satisfy me." The elevator doors slid shut, and she was forced to step back. Chapter 11. That evening, my assistant mentioned something to me, CEO Wang, regarding Ms. Willow. He paused briefly before continuing. "The organizers of the University Industry Forum have cancelled her seat. The invitation has been reassigned to another professor." I gave a simple acknowledgement. Once resources stopped flowing in her direction, the opportunities naturally went elsewhere. Over the following days, Willow lost her footing. Her carefully arranged schedule, lectures, exchanges, meetings, corporate visits, all of it was disrupted. After all, those opportunities had never truly been hers to decide. Everything depended on whether others were willing to provide her with resources. If they were willing, she had a place at the table. If they weren't, she wouldn't even be invited to sit down. She called me once. I didn't answer. Later, she sent a short message. "I want to meet." I didn't reply. I had no need to maintain appearances with an ex-wife. A week later, Willow appeared in the lobby of one of our partner companies. I had invested in that company, not heavily, but enough to have people on its board. She had gone there to discuss a university joint research project. Under normal circumstances, she should have been allowed in. Instead, she was stopped at reception, not rudely. In fact, the politeness was so flawless that it left her with nothing to attack. "Professor Willow, we're very sorry." The receptionist smiled professionally. "Your name isn't on today's meeting list. The project manager is currently in a meeting and may not be available. Would you like to leave your materials with us? We'll make sure they're passed along." The smile on Willow's face began to crack. "You confirmed last week that I would be handling this project." The receptionist remained perfectly courteous. "Then perhaps the liaison has been changed." Willow stood in the lobby gripping her phone tightly. Right there, she dialed the project manager. The phone rang for a long time before someone answered. "Professor Willow, I'm sorry." The manager's voice was low. "There have been some last-minute adjustments. We're still interested in the collaboration, but the liaison has been changed." A brief pause. "Please don't make this difficult for me." "Who replaced me?" she asked. The manager hesitated for 2 seconds. "Someone from CEO Wang's side." The color drained instantly from Willow's face. That day, she didn't lose her temper. She lowered her phone, turned around, and walked away. Her steps were quick, as though she were afraid someone might witness her humiliation. The next day, she went to see her advisor. Her advisor was an elderly professor known for his gentle temperament. He always left room for people to save face. But that day, he asked only one question. "Have you allowed personal problems to interfere with your work?" Willow's lips moved. "No." The professor looked at her and sighed. "I don't care what problems you're having at home." His voice remained calm. "But people have stopped extending you the same courtesy they used to. You should think carefully about why." Willow's fingers tightened around the strap of her handbag. She wanted to argue, yet she realized she had no evidence with which to defend herself. Everyone's attitude toward her seemed unchanged, and yet completely different. Before, people had eagerly opened doors for her. Now, they politely stepped aside. That kind of distance was the most painful, because it didn't look like an attack. It looked like everyone was simply following procedure. She began trying to repair the situation through other means. She contacted corporate executives she had once shared tea and conversations with, inviting them to meals, requesting meetings. Their responses were courteous. "I've been very busy lately." Another time, she reached out to wealthy socialites who had once treated her warmly at dinner parties. They responded just as politely. "My child has been sick recently." Another time, in a single day, she could hear the phrase "another time" more than a dozen times. Yet she couldn't secure a single lunch appointment. Only then did she finally realize something. Most of the people she had considered friends had never truly been her friends at all. They had simply been treating her as Mrs. Wang. Chapter 12. Once the title was gone, the doors closed with it. Willow began to panic. She went through her entire contact list, reaching out to everyone she could, anyone she could meet. She met. The harder she tried, the more desperate she appeared. People no longer looked up to her. Suddenly, she had become the one asking others for favors. It was a feeling she hated. She endured it for several days before finally calling Makoto. The first call went unanswered. She called again. Still no answer. She sent him a message. "I want to see you. Come out for a moment." Half an hour later, Makoto replied, "Willow, I'm busy. Let's talk later." She stared at those words. "Let's talk later." Her fingers felt cold. She went directly to the university. She waited outside the laboratory building for a long time before finally seeing Makoto emerge from a side entrance. 2 classmates were walking beside him. The moment he saw her, his pace visibly slowed. Then he pretended not to notice and lowered his head. Continuing forward, Willow hurried after him and grabbed his sleeve. "Makoto." Her voice was sharp. "Are you avoiding me?" The 2 classmates froze, exchanging a glance. They wisely found an excuse to leave. Only then did Makoto turn around. A troubled smile appeared on his face. "Willow, what are you doing here?" She bit her lip. "I called you. You didn't answer. What could you possibly be so busy with that you can't even return a call?" Makoto gently pulled his sleeve free. The movement wasn't dramatic, but it was unmistakable. "Willow, I've genuinely been busy lately. My advisor has been pressuring me. I still have progress reports to prepare." Willow spoke quickly. "Did you say something to George after that dinner?" Makoto immediately waved his hands. "I didn't say anything." Willow stepped closer. "You called him. Don't bother denying it." For a split second, Makoto's expression changed. Then the innocent look returned. "Willow, I was worried the 2 of you would have conflict because of me." His voice lowered. "I only wanted to help mediate between you. I had good intentions." "Good intentions?" Willow let out a cold laugh. "If your intentions were so good, why didn't you ask me first?" Makoto's gaze shifted away. "I didn't think that far ahead." Willow stared at him, as if she were seeing him clearly for the first time. "I've lost projects. My speaking invitations have been cancelled. I can't even get meetings anymore." Her voice tightened. "You say you meant well. Then can you help me now?" Makoto's shoulders subtly shrank. "Willow, what could I possibly do about something like this?" His voice became even softer. "As for CEO Wang," he hesitated. "Once he makes a decision, nobody can change his mind." Willow's eyes instantly reddened. Biting her lip, she said, "Weren't you so confident that night? Weren't you the one speaking for me? Weren't you the one explaining my feelings? Now that I actually need your help, suddenly there's nothing you can do." A flash of impatience crossed Makoto's face. It disappeared almost immediately. "Willow, don't do this." He forced a gentle tone. "You 2 were husband and wife. Couples argue and then make up. You should just go talk to him." A pause. "Haven't you always been good at handling relationships like this?" The words pierced straight through her. Willow's expression froze. "Talk to him," she repeated softly. "You think there's anything left that could make him listen to me?" Makoto said nothing. That silence was more revealing than any answer. It wasn't that he didn't understand. He did. He had simply begun calculating costs and benefits. And suddenly, Willow understood something as well. Makoto had never drawn close to her because of who she was. He had been drawn to the door behind her. Now that the door was closed, he had no interest in standing outside it any longer. Willow slowly released her grip. Her voice turned cold. "You can go." It sounded as though Makoto had been waiting for those words. He immediately nodded. "Willow, take care of yourself." Then he turned and left, quickly, as though afraid she might try to stop him again. Willow remained where she was. Her face was frighteningly pale. For a moment, she wanted to call after him, but no words came out. Suddenly, the entire situation felt absurd. She had thought she was taking care of a junior. Instead, she had nurtured an ungrateful opportunist, and when that opportunist walked away, he couldn't even be bothered to look back at her once. Chapter 13. I never made a point of keeping track of what Willow was doing. The loss of her status, her social circle, and the respect she once enjoyed was simply the natural outcome of what had happened. I had no need to monitor her situation, nor did I take pleasure in her downfall. My objective had never been to see how miserable she could become. It had always been to cut off the hand that had reached far beyond its place. Makoto believed that once one door closed, he could simply knock on another. He even considered himself clever. He knew how to appear humble. He knew how to speak softly. He knew how to talk his way out of responsibility, turning everything into a misunderstanding, as though that somehow made him untouchable. But in the real world, nobody is interested in debating excuses with you. That afternoon, I asked my assistant to place a file on my desk. There was no scandal in it, no dirty tricks, just several public event registration forms, invitation confirmations, event correspondence emails, and a few signed receipt records, all traces he had left behind himself. Using Willow's name, he had contacted a company and claimed they were organizing a university industry collaborative project exhibition that required sponsored booth space. The company had copied one of our partnership managers on the email. The wording was very clear: Professor Willow's team, student Ito responsible for execution. The problem was that no collaborative exhibition had ever been approved by us. On one of the registration forms, he had even listed a title for himself: Wang Group Cooperative Project Coordinator. At first glance, it seemed insignificant, but it was enough to make uninformed people assume he had official authorization. My assistant asked, "Should we issue a clarification letter?" I shook my head. "No. A clarification letter would be like slapping someone from a distance. Loud, visible, but not direct enough. I wanted him to lose face in front of everyone. 2 days later, an industry exchange conference was held at the city's newly completed exhibition center. The organizer was the Shenwan Association. Attendees included corporations, universities, and representatives from several foundations. Willow had often appeared at events like this. She spoke well. She presented herself well. People naturally treated her as one of the university's public faces. This time, she wasn't there. Makoto was. When I entered the venue, he was busy running around the exhibition area. His badge hung from his chest. University representative. He wore a suit. The sleeves were slightly too long. His tie was pulled unusually tight. His face carried that deliberately serious expression people wear when trying too hard to look professional. The moment he saw me, he visibly stiffened. His steps halted briefly. Clearly, he hadn't expected me to appear. Very quickly, he forced out a smile and approached. CEO Wang, you're here as well. His voice was deliberately lowered. I didn't expect to run into you here. I ignored the greeting. Instead, my gaze moved to the booth sign behind him. The university's name was displayed prominently. Next to it were the logos of 2 corporations. One of them happened to be the company in which I had invested. I asked, "You're responsible for this booth?" His eyes flickered away. "Oh, He hesitated. "I'm just helping out." I looked at him. "Helping out?" Then I glanced at his badge. "You've helped yourself into becoming a university representative." The smile froze on his face. 2 association officials happened to be passing nearby. Upon hearing my question, they slowed their pace. Immediately, Makoto lowered his voice. "CEO Wang, could we discuss this privately?" I looked at him calmly. "Aren't you the one who enjoys speaking on behalf of other people?" I paused. "Now that it's your turn, suddenly you want privacy." His face instantly turned red. "That's not what I mean." He hurried to explain. "I just don't want this to affect Professor Willow's reputation." He was still calling her Professor Willow, as if saying her title aloud could somehow continue protecting him. I stopped paying attention to him and walked straight toward the main conference hall. One segment of the event involved project presentations. Several organizations would present their collaboration achievements and future plans on stage. Makoto had been scheduled third. His name appeared clearly in the conference handbook. University Project Execution Representative. I sat in the front row. Beside me were the association's Secretary General and 2 corporate executives. When the host introduced the third speaker, Makoto stepped onto the stage, holding the microphone. He took a deep breath and bowed. "Distinguished professors, leaders, and corporate partners, good afternoon. My name is Makoto, and I come from..." Before he could finish the sentence, murmurs had already begun spreading through the audience, because the project title he announced was nearly identical to the one Willow had previously negotiated. Only the subtitle had been changed. He advanced to the second slide of his presentation. Printed at the bottom of the page were the words, "Joint Exhibition, Wang Group Collaborative Project, Chapter 14. I heard one of the corporate representatives beside me clear his throat and turn to look at me. I set down my pen and raised a hand toward the host. The host froze for a moment before handing me the microphone. "CEO Wang, do you have a question?" I stood up. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried clearly throughout the hall. "There are several matters I would like to clarify." I paused. "First, has this project received authorization from my company to use our corporate name as a joint exhibitor?" The expression on Makoto's face changed instantly. His grip tightened around the microphone and then loosened again. The color drained from his lips. The host turned toward the association's Secretary General. The Secretary General was equally stunned. Clearly, he had not expected this situation. I continued. "Second, Mr. Ito listed his position in the registration documents as Collaborative Project Coordinator." I looked directly at the stage. "Who appointed him to that position? Where is the appointment document?" The room fell silent with remarkable speed. Some people began flipping through the conference handbook. Others stared at Makoto on the stage. His eyes darted around briefly. Still, he forced a smile. "CEO Wang, there may have been a mistake during registration." His voice was becoming unstable. "I'm only a student. How could I possibly?" "Then let's discuss the third issue." I cut him off. "When contacting external companies, you used Willow's name. You copied our company representatives on those emails." I paused. "And you wrote, Professor Willow's team, student Ito responsible for execution." My gaze remained fixed on him. "Who authorized you to write that?" Makoto swallowed hard. His Adam's apple moved visibly. He opened his mouth to explain, then seemed to realize that any explanation he gave could easily contradict something else. The humble, harmless persona he usually relied on was useless here. The host's expression grew increasingly awkward. Trying to ease the tension, he quickly said, "CEO Wang, perhaps this is simply a misunderstanding. We can discuss it after the conference." I raised a hand. The host immediately fell silent. A misunderstanding is possible. I looked toward the stage, but even misunderstandings have causes. Then I addressed Makoto directly. Makoto, you can explain it clearly in front of everyone. My voice remained calm. Did you use your identity as Willows Jr. to present yourself as the university's designated liaison? The last traces of color vanished from Makoto's face. Instinctively, he looked toward a section of the audience, as if searching for someone who could save him, but Willow wasn't there. The shadow he was looking for no longer existed. A corporate representative in the audience frowned. CEO Wang, if this is true, we'll need to reassess the risks of this collaboration. Another attendee from a foundation spoke up as well. There's nothing wrong with a student representative presenting on stage. He adjusted his glasses, but you cannot make commitments to external parties using authorization that doesn't exist. Makoto panicked. He pulled the microphone closer. His voice trembled. I never made any commitments. I was only responsible for implementation. I just assumed Professor Willow had approved it. Assumed. I repeated the word. Then I took out my phone. Opening an email, I handed it to the Secretary General beside me. This is the coordination email you sent. I looked back at Makoto. It contains the phrase Wang Group Joint Exhibition. I paused. Did you add those words yourself? Or did someone instruct you to add them? Chapter 15. The Secretary General only glanced through the email twice before his expression darkened immediately. The moment Makoto saw that reaction, his panic became even more obvious. He tried to steer the conversation back toward the familiar defense of good intentions. CEO Wang, I truly didn't mean any harm. His voice shook slightly. I just wanted to make the project better. I wanted the resources. I cut him off. Resources aren't something you can simply reach out and take. I remained where I was, my voice calm. If you want resources, you apply through proper procedures. If you want a joint exhibition, you obtain legitimate authorization. I looked directly at him. What you're using right now is someone else's name, someone else's relationships, someone else's position. Makoto's eyes reddened. Still, he forced himself to continue. I work hard too. Every day I'm running experiments and writing reports. I only wanted people to see the results. No one in the audience responded. Hard work is a qualification, not an exemption from responsibility. The host glanced at me. It was obvious he wanted to end the discussion. I didn't continue pressing him. Instead, I delivered one final statement so everyone would understand exactly where the boundary lay. Effective immediately. Any joint exhibition involving our company and this project is suspended. I looked around the room. If the association or any corporate partners require coordination, please contact the officially designated representative from our side. The updated list will be provided after the conference. Then I sat down. Scattered applause echoed through the hall. It quickly faded. The applause wasn't for me. It was simply acknowledgement that the issue had finally been addressed openly. But Makoto remained standing on stage, gripping the microphone. He looked as though all the strength had been drained from his body, unable to stay, unable to leave. The host forced a smile and awkwardly resumed control. All right, let's proceed to our next presenter. When Makoto stepped down from the stage, his legs were visibly unsteady. He nearly missed the staircase. As he moved toward the aisle, 2 event staff members intercepted him and politely requested that he accompany them to the conference office to provide supplemental documentation. He looked up and saw me. For the first time, there was no eagerness to please in his eyes, only panic and resentment. I didn't acknowledge the look. Instead, I turned back to continue discussing projects with the corporate executive beside me. The entire incident was nothing more than sweeping a piece of dirt off the table. After the conference ended, many people passed by and stopped to greet me. One person asked, CEO Wang, that student just now, isn't he Professor Willows Jr.? I answered. He used to be. The men immediately understood. I see. Another attendee was even more direct. People like that are despicable. He shook his head. If you hadn't been here today, we all might have been fooled. I didn't encourage that line of discussion. I merely replied. Procedures exist for a reason. As long as everyone follows them, problems like this won't happen. When I walked out of the venue, Makoto was standing at the far end of the corridor beside a window. His face was ashen. He had even forgotten to button his suit jacket. The moment he saw me, he looked like a trapped animal cornered with nowhere left to run. CEO Wang. His voice was hoarse. Why did you have to expose me in front of so many people? I stopped a step away from him. You openly used my company's name in front of all those people. I looked at him steadily. Why didn't that shame you? He opened his mouth, closed it, then finally managed to say, I thought. His voice weakened. I thought you wouldn't really hold it against me. I looked at him. You're not my opponent. I paused. You're not important enough for me to bother holding a grudge. But when you place yourself in the wrong position, you bear the consequences that come with it. He clenched his teeth. What about Professor Willow? His voice rose slightly. She brought me to plenty of events before. Are you going to Her issues are separate from yours. I cut him off. The words hit him like cold water. At that moment, Makoto finally understood. Even Willow could no longer protect him. He looked as though he wanted to say something else. Before he could, someone behind him called his name and reminded him to sign additional paperwork. When he turned around, he noticed something. Several people who had been chatting warmly with him earlier had already drifted away, as if they were afraid of being associated with trouble. He stood there frozen, his lips pale, his eyes vacant for a brief moment. I continued toward the parking lot. Before I got into the car, my assistant asked, "CEO Wang, should we proceed with the next step?" I shook my head. No. Sometimes, pushing someone off a high platform doesn't require force. I leaned back against the seat and closed my eyes. Once a person loses the right to be trusted, every explanation becomes just another excuse. Chapter 16. After the incident at the exhibition center, my phone remained quiet for 2 days. On the evening of the third day, my assistant placed a visitor registration form on my desk. "CEO Wang, there's a Ms. Willow downstairs. She says she wants to see you." Without even looking up, I replied. "Send her up." My assistant hesitated. "She doesn't have an appointment." "I know." I set down my pen. "Send her up." 10 minutes later, Willow appeared at my office door. She was dressed simply, a white blouse and a black skirt. Her hair was tied back. There was almost no sign of makeup. She seemed thinner than before. The dark circles beneath her eyes were obvious, yet her head remained held high. She stood in the doorway. Unlike before, she didn't begin with small talk. Walking inside, she closed the door and stopped in front of my desk. "George." Her voice was slightly hoarse. "I want to talk." I didn't offer her a seat. "Talk." She placed her handbag on the back of a chair. Her hands clasped together. Her fingertips had turned pale. "I know you don't want to hear explanations." She paused. "So I won't explain. I only want to ask one question." She looked at me. "Have you already decided that you're not giving me any chance at all?" I met her gaze. "You already know the answer." After 2 seconds of silence, she nodded. "But I still want to hear you say it yourself." I closed the file in front of me. "I already gave you a chance." Her lips moved slightly. Then, she swallowed. "What if I'm willing to change?" I didn't answer immediately. She seized upon the silence. "I can change." Her words came quickly. "I really can. I won't contact Makoto anymore. I won't bring him to any events. I won't let him appear in front of us again." She looked at me desperately. "If you think I've done something wrong, I'll change it however you want." She sounded serious, so serious that it felt like she was presenting a formal proposal. I looked at her. "Why are you saying all this now?" She froze. "For us." A faint smile crossed my face. I slowly shook my head. "No, we're already over." I looked directly at her. "What you're asking for now is a return to the past." Her eyes reddened. Her voice dropped. "I don't want to be replaced." I raised my gaze toward her. "The person you've always cared about most is yourself." The word struck a nerve. Immediately, she tried to deny it. "No, it isn't." "Yes, it is." My voice remained calm. "You became accustomed to being Mrs. Wang. You became accustomed to people treating you politely. You became accustomed to being viewed as the face of something important." I continued. "And when you lost all of that, you wanted it back." Her shoulders trembled slightly. "But I truly regret it." She looked up at me. "The shrimp." Her voice faltered. "That was my fault." For the first time, she finally addressed the real issue. Yet even now, her apology sounded like she was discussing a mistake that could simply be corrected. I ignored the apology itself. Instead, I asked, "What exactly do you regret?" She opened her mouth, then answered, "I regret making you misunderstand. I regret not considering your feelings. I regret not putting myself in your position at that dinner." I looked at her quietly. "You still haven't reached the root of it." Frustration flashed across her face. "Then what is it?" Her voice rose. "What do you want to hear?" I stood up and walked around the desk toward the window. "You thought peeling shrimp was nothing." I looked outside. "You thought having him speak for you was nothing. You thought bringing him into my social circle was nothing." I turned around. "You've always believed that as long as there was no kissing, as long as there was no sleeping together, then it wasn't cheating, and it certainly wasn't crossing a line." The color slowly drained from Willow's face. I looked directly at her. "That's the real problem." She clenched her teeth. "Then what if I admit it now?" Her voice trembled. "What if I admit that I lacked boundaries? Would that be enough?" "It's not difficult to admit it," I answered calmly. "The difficult part is recognizing it while you're still comfortable and privileged." A tear finally slipped down her face. She wiped it away immediately, almost as if she didn't want me to see it. "I really will change." Her voice shook. "I'll keep my distance from other men. I'll make my boundaries absolutely clear." I looked at her. My tone remained even. "You think that because you've changed, I should turn back?" She froze. "That's not what I mean." She hurried to explain. Her voice weakened. "I don't want us to end up here. We already have." I answered. She lifted her head. There was panic in her eyes, and unwillingness to accept reality. Then, after a long pause, she asked, "Is there someone else already?" Chapter 17. I didn't answer. She immediately seized on my silence. "If you won't answer, then that's your answer." Her voice grew sharper. "George, how long has it even been since the divorce? And already you..." I cut her off. "Did you come here to talk about your situation, or to interrogate me?" Her face shifted between pale and flushed. After a long moment, she took a deep breath and forced herself to calm down. "Fine. I won't ask about that." She looked at me. "I only want to know one thing. Can you give me another chance?" I didn't waste time. "No." The answer was immediate. Her lips trembled. It looked as though an invisible punch had landed squarely in her chest. "Why?" Her voice broke. "We were married for 2 years. You can really throw all of that away. I only made this one mistake." "You didn't make just one mistake," I interrupted. She froze. I walked back to my desk. Opening a drawer, I removed several documents and placed them on the tabletop. The first was a copy of the guest list from that dinner. Her name was there. So was Makoto's as her accompanying guest. The second was an email from her advisor regarding a project reassignment. She was copied on it. So was Makoto. The contents were brief. Liaison changed. Reason not disclosed. The third was a screenshot of Makoto's registration form from the exhibition event. His listed title was displayed clearly. Willow stared at the papers. Slowly, the focus in her eyes began to fade. Her voice turned hoarse. "What are you trying to prove by showing me these? I want you to understand one thing." I looked at her calmly. It wasn't one incident. It was a chain of them. She lifted her head. Frustration flashed in her eyes. "What Makoto did wasn't my instruction." "I know," I answered. For the first time, her expression relaxed slightly, as if she had finally found a point in her favor. "Then why are you blaming me for it?" I looked directly at her. "Because he dared to use your name." I paused. "And he only dared because your attitude told him he could." Her entire body stiffened. "I never did that." She responded immediately. "I never told him to use my identity for anything." I tapped the documents lightly. "Then why did you allow him to speak for you at the dinner? Why did you allow him to stand beside you and protect you? Why did you never stop him when he called me and talked about how tired you were?" The questions left her speechless. She wanted to explain, but every explanation sounded weaker than the last. Eventually she managed to say, "I didn't think about it that much." I corrected her. "You never think about it that much." Her eyes reddened again. "I admit it." Her voice trembled. "I admit I didn't think enough. But now I have. I've thought about it, and I'm willing to change." She looked at me desperately. "So why are you still pushing me?" "I'm not pushing you," I answered calmly. "You're walking your own path." Suddenly she looked up. "With one sentence, you can make people stop working with me. With one sentence, you can get my forum invitations cancelled. With one sentence, you can make people avoid me." Her voice shook. "And you say you're not pushing me?" I didn't deny that I had influence. Instead, I clarified the issue. "That's not pressure." I met her gaze. "That's simply the normal consequence of losing that identity." The color drained from her face. At that moment, she finally realized something. The thing she had depended on most was not me as a person. It was everything that came with being associated with me. Her lips turned pale. Her voice dropped lower. "Then from now on," she swallowed, "I'll stand on your side." I looked at her. "Did you ever?" She froze. I continued. "At that dinner, I was sitting directly across from you. When you peeled shrimp for him, you never looked at me once. Later, when he called me and talked about how tired you were, you didn't think that was inappropriate either." I paused. "You know perfectly well whose side you were standing on." Her eyes trembled, as though she were being forced to relive every one of those moments. In a small voice, she said, "I thought you didn't care." "You thought." I repeated the words. "You were always thinking." She bit her lip. Tears flowed more heavily now, yet she still held on to her stubborn pride. "Then I won't think that way anymore." She looked directly at me. "I'm saying it here. From now on, I will never allow anything like that to happen again." Her voice echoed through the office, but for the first time, even she seemed uncertain whether she was making a promise to me, or trying to convince herself. Chapter 18. I wasn't moved by her tears. I sat back down in my chair and looked at her. "You're talking about the future." She nodded. "Yes, the future," I replied. "I don't need your future. How can you be this heartless?" Her voice carried a sob. "You weren't like this before. At least before. You would let me finish talking." I looked at her. "I did let you finish." She shook her head. "No, you didn't." "I did," I answered calmly. "You said you'd change. You said you'd have better boundaries. You said you regretted it. You said you didn't want to be replaced. You said you didn't want things to end up like this." I paused. Then my voice turned colder. "But every one of those things was said only after you'd already lost everything." She froze. I continued. "You didn't come here because you suddenly understood what was wrong. You came here because you suddenly understood the consequences." Her breathing became unsteady. It was as if someone had ripped the mask from her face in public. She wanted to argue, but she couldn't find a single convincing argument. Finally, she revealed what she thought was her last bargaining chip. I can cut Makoto out of my life. I interrupted immediately. Whether you cut him out or not has nothing to do with me. I looked at her. Don't mistake your current emotional collapse for a solution. She stood there stunned. Then what do you want? The words nearly came out as a shout. What exactly do I have to do before you'll let me go? I looked at her. My tone remained calm. I already have. She couldn't understand. Confusion filled her eyes. I pointed toward the agreement. The assets were divided according to the rules. I didn't touch what belongs to you. Your future is your own to manage. I even preserved the dignity you wanted. Then I continued. The reason you're asking me to let you go is because you've mistaken the loss of resources for me targeting you. Her lips trembled violently. For the first time, the anger disappeared from her eyes. What replaced it was genuine fear. At last, she realized something. What she wanted wasn't merely reconciliation. What she wanted was for the door of the Wang family to open again. And it never would. Willow stood there for a long time, as though every ounce of strength had been drained from her body. In a low voice, she said, "It's not that I never thought it was wrong." She swallowed. "I just thought you would tolerate it." I looked at her. There. My voice was quiet. "You finally said it." She raised her head. Her vision blurred with tears. "I really do know I was wrong." I didn't continue arguing about the word wrong. Instead, I called her name. Willow. She held her breath. Then I said, "It wasn't that you made one mistake." I paused. "You never believed it was wrong from the very beginning." The words settled between us. Her expression shattered completely. She opened her mouth, trying to say something. In the end, only a faint breath escaped. For a moment, it looked as though she wanted to leave, yet she couldn't bring herself to. The tip of her shoe brushed lightly against the carpet. Then she asked, "What about my future?" Her voice was so soft that it felt as though she had pressed down the last remaining fragment of her pride. I pressed the intercom button. "Please see our guest out." The assistant entered almost immediately and stood politely by the door. Willow looked at the assistant, then at me. Her face was pale, yet she still straightened her back. Picking up her handbag, she walked toward the exit. At the doorway, she stopped. She didn't turn around. "George," her voice was barely above a whisper, "you're really not leaving me any room at all." Chapter 19. After Willow left, I put all the documents on my desk back into the drawer. Not because I needed to vent any emotions, simply because the matter was finished. Many people assume that revenge must be accompanied by emotional outbursts. In reality, it doesn't. The true reckoning often begins when the other person realizes that you are no longer participating in their life. That sense of weightlessness lasts far longer than any argument. After that, my life gradually returned to its normal rhythm. Meetings, business trips, project development. Everything moved along its predetermined track. Occasionally, my assistant would report some developments from the sidelines. I listened, and offered no comment. As for Makoto, he quickly disappeared from view. The event lists he had once managed to slip into began changing frequently. Responses to his emails became slower. Collaboration invitations were quietly postponed. He tried reappearing under different labels: student representative, project assistant. None of it worked. Not because I was going around warning people about him, but because after being exposed publicly at that conference, everyone understood one thing: this was a person without boundaries. In many professional circles, that's a fatal flaw. Later, I heard he had left his original team. The official explanation was personal career direction adjustment. Where he went afterward, nobody cared enough to find out. Willow, on the other hand, became much quieter. She never came looking for me again. She was intelligent enough to understand that doing so would only humiliate herself further. Instead, she began trying to rebuild her life, using the education, experience, and network she had always possessed. She genuinely had ability. The problem was that ability takes time to translate into results once external support disappears, and she had become accustomed to being elevated by others. Now, no one was elevating her anymore. She had to wait her turn. For her, that adjustment was even harder than outright rejection. Occasionally, I saw her at public events. Never too close, never too far. Close enough to recognize, far enough to remain strangers. She seemed calmer than before, more restrained when she spoke, as though she had finally realized that many things she once considered normal were actually privileges she had been granted. When she looked at me, there was no longer any emotion, only distance. She finally understood that I would never turn back, and I truly never looked back at her again. The space left behind in my life remained empty for a while. I wasn't in a hurry to fill it. I had no need to prove anything through a new relationship. But life doesn't stop moving. At a business dinner, I met Anna. She was the legal director for one of our partners. Early 30s, concise in conversation, neither eager to approach people nor deliberately distant. We sat at the same table. Throughout the entire evening, she spoke only about work, no personal topics. When the dinner ended, she stood up, nodded politely to me, and left without adding a single unnecessary word. The next day, she sent the required documents through the proper corporate channels. No greetings, no small talk. I appreciated that sense of boundaries. Over the next several interactions, everything remained straightforward. Discuss business, finish business, leave separately. One evening, after a meeting ran late, she casually asked, "Would you like to grab a simple meal downstairs?" Her tone was natural, not probing, not suggestive. I agreed. During dinner, she didn't ask about my past, nor did she deliberately avoid it. She only said one thing: "Working with you is very easy." I replied, "You have excellent boundaries." She smiled. "Isn't that the minimum requirement?" After that, we began seeing each other seriously. There was no drawn-out stage of ambiguity, no emotional tug-of-war. She understood clearly what I needed, and I understood clearly what she could offer. If it worked, we continued. If it didn't, we ended it. That kind of relationship felt comfortable to me, not because Anna was better than Willow, but because from the very beginning, she stood exactly where she was supposed to stand. Time continued moving forward, and eventually, everything settled into place. Chapter 20. I no longer heard news about Willow, nor did I hear Makoto's name anymore. Occasionally, someone would mention them in passing. "Oh, the former Mrs. Wang. I heard she's handling projects independently now." I would simply nod. Past relationships don't need to be settled over and over again. They've already expired. One evening, I returned home. The kitchen was spotless. Anna stood at the counter, placing freshly peeled shrimp onto a plate. Her movements were efficient and precise. She wasn't wearing gloves. The shrimp shells came off cleanly. Nothing elaborate about the technique. She placed the shrimp into a pan and turned to look at me. "Do you want some?" "You can have it," I replied. She nodded, and didn't ask again. Throughout the entire process, she never moved closer to me, nor did she instinctively place anything in front of me. She simply focused on what she was doing. In that moment, I suddenly realized something. What I called a cleanliness obsession was never about rejecting closeness. It was about rejecting disorder, rejecting ambiguity, rejecting people who crossed boundaries while pretending they had done nothing wrong. I sat at the dining table and watched her bring the dishes over. The lighting was clean. The aromas were clear. Everything felt exactly as it should. And at that moment, I became certain of one thing. People who have no sense of boundaries do not deserve a place beside me.